I'm not giving any more 3-star reviews in 2026. I think the 3-star book review is a cop-out, and I have used it often as a way to wiggle out of having to actually be decisive about whether or not I liked a book and why. So in the rest of this video, I'm going to explain to you how I came up with this system, how I am going to use it, and I have some example books that I'll use to demonstrate the rating system. I've been reading fantasy novels since I was a kid. Since I was about 9 is when I picked up The Hobbit for the first time. And since then, I've had just sort of a vague, more vibes-based approach to deciding whether or not I liked a book. At the end of it, I sort of ask myself, was it fun? Did I enjoy it? Like, what's the lingering sensation or feeling I get about the book? But there isn't really any rigor or sophistication or any further thought beyond that point.
Was it worth it?
I don't know.
So I decided for 2026, and to help me better talk about books on this channel, that I would actually put some rigor into developing my rating framework and use it to be able to explain what I like about different books. My scoring system is based on 5 stars, but as I said, there are no 3 stars allowed. So why did I pick 5 stars? Well, the answer is quite simple, actually. It's because everyone uses a 5-star rating system. Amazon, Goodreads, etc., etc. And so just to make my framework compliant with the way that review systems work out there in the real world, I decided to go ahead and stick with 5 stars. Where does it come from? Well, I worked at a tech company in Silicon Valley, and we did a lot of hiring there. What we would do is when we were interviewing a candidate, multiple people from the company would meet this person, and at the end of the day, we would all get together, and the first thing we would do is give a collective score for the candidate that was out of 5. And the rule was no 3s allowed, and here's how the scoring worked. 1, I'll quit if you hire this person. 2, I don't think we should hire this person, but I could be convinced. 4, I do think we should hire this person, but I could be convinced otherwise. And 5, if you don't hire this person, I'll quit. Nobody ever actually quit over a hiring decision that was made in that room, but just to illustrate the dedication or the passion behind the scoring system, and then we would all debate. So I'm bringing that same level of commitment to scoring my novels in 2026. Okay, so let's talk about the Tired Book Dad 5-star, no 3 stars allowed book rating system. I'm gonna work on that title. Here's how it works. 1, warning label. I actively tell my friends and anyone who will listen to me to skip the book. 2, it's not for me, but I understand there's an audience for the book. Or in other words, I wouldn't recommend it to most people that I know. Of course, we have no 3 stars. 4, strong yes for the right reader, and I would recommend it. 5, I push this book on people. I will probably reread this book, and it's something I might even consider buying and keeping on my currently non-existent bookshelf. Now, what is the purpose of eliminating the 3 in this system? It's to force myself, and anyone who wants to come along for the ride, to pick a side. I know that I am guilty of giving 3 stars, 3.5, maybe even 3.25. There's no fractions either, by the way. Whole numbers only.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
And so the goal here is just to force myself to be decisive, to form an opinion and stand behind that opinion. Of course, opinions can always change, generally not if it's a 1 or a 5, but the goal is really just make myself come up with a conclusive reason as to why I liked or did not like a book. To illustrate the framework a bit better, I've come up with a number of anchor books that are going to be examples in each ranking or each rating in the system that not only will help you understand how I think about and score books, but also for myself, what are example books and how would I rate any new book against these anchor books. First, the 5s, books that I would push on people. The first is the Powder Mage trilogy by Brian McClellan. This is a book I haven't heard really anyone talk about online. I loved it. The black powder age technology, also blended with magic, kind of takes the question of like, why don't guns exist in fantasy universe, and says, well, they do, and wizards are using them, or mages are using them. And I thought that that was just like a really cool magical system. It also exists simultaneously with other more traditional high fantasy type magic, which is a cool and interesting kind of vibe as well. And the books are just like a really interesting blend of political thriller with a sort of like save the world kind of thing going on, and a murder mystery. I enjoyed the characters. There's interesting different perspectives, and it was just like a really fun series. And in fact, I'm probably going to reread it this year. There's the Powder Mage trilogy, and then there's also 3 more books that came after later that were still good, not as good as the original trilogy, but still enjoyable. Another 5-star anchor book is, of course, A Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, it's just, that book to me is just like peak fantasy, just no holds barred. The world building is super deep, the prose is phenomenal, the plot is insane. I mean, you know, if you've read Song of Ice and Fire, you at least know what I'm talking about, even if you don't feel about it the same way that I do. I debated putting Tolkien here, but as much as I'd like Tolkien, to me, Tolkien is the OG, but I wouldn't go so far as to call him the greatest of all time.
Pull back! Pull back!
Okay, I don't know if I'm gonna get roasted for that opinion, but there you go. I said it. All right, now for 4-star books. The first is the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. Points for a highly original, innovative magical system, a sort of compelling kind of plot with the blinding knife and that driving all of the action through the subsequent books. A really cool aspect of halos and what happens with halos, trying not to give any spoilers away here. So, you know, all that was really fun and enjoyable. I just felt that like the book didn't quite stick the landing and the payoff wasn't quite what I was hoping for after having gone through, I forget what it was, like 6 or 7 books. So a lot of investment, some interesting fun twists, great magic and cool world building, but like just didn't quite get there for me. Temeraire. Man, Naomi Novik is an absolute master at writing. She's written so many different kinds of books. And Temeraire was cool because A, dragons. I talked about that I love dragons in my beginner tag video. And B, what if dragons were ships of the line is just like such a cool concept. Now, why did it make a 5 for me? Because it was 9 books long. Some of the books just felt so unnecessary, just like, hey, we have to go from point A to point B and we're gonna write a whole book about it. And that really bothered me. It definitely could have been a shorter series. Otherwise, very well written, excellent prose. One of the few authors I've seen pull off time and setting, accurate English in the prose, the behaviors and mannerisms and stuff. And so I just really enjoyed all the effort that went into those books, but it missed the mark for me by a bit. And lastly, Cinder Spires by Jim Butcher. Basically, this one just got me because I really like, I don't know if it's called etherpunk. I don't find very many books that are written with ether-based magic systems, airships, boarding actions, again, sort of like this naval kind of military theme here, and an interesting plot with intrigue. But there were sort of numerous points about the series where it just like didn't quite land for me, so an enjoyable read overall. The first book was quite good. I think, you know, the second book, not quite as good, but I enjoy the world. Of course, ether-based magic and tech is really cool. So, you know, an enjoyable read that I would generally recommend to folks. Okay, on to the 2s. Now, I don't know if I'm gonna get absolutely, you know, roasted for this one because I know people who like this series feel strongly about it, but for me, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, generally would not recommend. Extremely long, extremely dense, and any book that comes out with like a table of characters, boy, I really gotta wanna like go into that. And I did read it from start to finish. Kinda read it, to be honest with you, by the end. You know, this was a decade ago. Maybe if I read it now, maybe it would land differently with me these days, but I frankly just don't feel like investing that kind of time and energy. It was confusing, overwrought. The style of it, you know, itself was quite decisive, the way that the chapters are super long and such. And so I know some people feel really strongly about Malazan Book of the Fallen, but for me, just wouldn't really recommend. Another 2 is the Daevabad trilogy. But this one, I'll tell you what actually landed this one in the 2s for me was that I was expecting more of like a more action-filled kind of fantasy. What I got was kind of like romance and court political intrigue. And so this is a good example of a book that definitely has an audience, but I'm not the audience. I did read all 3 books because I just wanted to see where things wound up, but ultimately it just like, not really for me, but I understand why people would like it. All right, and last but not least, the 1s. I thought really hard about what would make a book a 1. There aren't really many books that are 1s for me, but this one definitely became a 1. That is The Empyrean. Man, as I said in my beginner tag video, I'm not a romantasy reader, and you know, things just got so hyped that I decided to give it a shot. And I'll tell you, ultimately, it wasn't even necessarily the romance and all the spice that made it so bad for me. It's that just like, the books aren't that well written. You know, cool concept, military school, everyone's mean, you gotta fight. Love the signets on the dragons, even like the conspiracy with the Children of the Revolution and all that, like some really cool building blocks and materials there, but just like super poorly executed. I just think that they're not well-written books, which is why I wouldn't really recommend them to anyone. That's the surest way to get yourself on the one list, is just a really poorly executed book. My own sort of internal filter, looking at a book, reading the summary, the blurbs and such, some of the reviews, that usually goes a pretty long way to keeping me from reading books that are ones. And even if I like DNF a book, it's not necessarily that the book is a one. Oftentimes a lot of my DNFs are twos. So you pretty much really only land yourself on the one list if it's just a really bad book. So now that we've gone through my rating system, I'm gonna be excited to make some videos talking about some recent novels that I've read, such as The Devils by Joe Abercrombie and The Hexologists by Josiah Bancroft. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, you've got another video that you can watch right here. Thanks for watching. See you next time.